Everyone see Andy and Ellie okay? Yes? Hands up. You can see Andy and Ellie okay. Great. Everyone can hear Andy and Ellie. Will you say hello, Andy and Ellie?
Hello, Andy and Ellie.
Hello.
Oh,
Great.
yeah.
Everyone okay? You can hear. Super. Right. Well, I would like to thank you all for coming this evening. It's so nice to see so many people. And I'm just delighted to be able to have this opportunity to talk to Andy and Ellie, who are gurus to me, I might say. And, you know, I run a theatre company that would not exist without Andy and Ellie and without their incredible knowledge and support and mentoring, and just their business acumen is extraordinary. And I've always just been so massively impressed with that. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves or say hello, and then please do let me know if you want to ask Andy and Ellie a question.
Is it us that you want to?
Yeah, well, no. Has anyone got a question, first of all? Has anyone got a burning question that they would like to ask? Oh, yes, I see a hand. It's John, but it's not John, it's the lady next to John.
John and Ellie.
John and Ellie, please do ask.
Hello.
Hello. How's the building work going?
The building work
Yeah.
is going slowly because we have to apply for permission to do anything other than clean our teeth and wash our hands and things like that. No, we're getting a little bit excited because this weekend, hopefully by this weekend, we will put in an application for all the things that we want to do. We were, in fact, about an hour ago, we were talking to the architect, and she was just finalising all the little details, and we were going through the fine-tooth comb, saying, change this word, and we need to look at that wood fibre instead of that wood fibre, and things like that. And so hopefully tomorrow she will send the application off, and then we'll be into wait and see what the conservation officer has to say about it all.
And we've heard varying things about conservation officers and how amenable they can be, depending on where they're from and what their experience is. So we're hoping to get a nice one.
Yeah.
Or at least someone who's sympathetic to what we want to do, which is to effectively not change very much about chapel, but just make our home livable so that we can spend our time looking after it and investing in making it work.
But as you can see from the decor, we've managed to get some of the old wallpaper off, at least. And we were actually saying earlier that the damp is definitely beginning to recede as we inhabit the place and have some heat in it and get rid of the old polystyrene and things like that. So yes, we're making very slow progress, but good progress.
Can I ask everyone who's listening, has everyone managed to see the documentary? So you know where Andy and Ellie are at right now, which is an extraordinary move for you guys. Very exciting. I've got some lovely questions. Actually, Jessica, would you like to ask your question? Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question wherever you are?
Yes, hi. Yes, I've just been watching your documentary. Very interesting, and all credit to you guys for surviving for 30 odd years in a small theatre company in the UK, which is I think an incredible achievement, because it's not always been easy to do that over the years, certainly. But I'm based up in Yorkshire, so I've come to see your productions at Harlow Car in the past, yeah. So I'm just interested, obviously the video took us to a point, but we've had the announcements this week about lockdown lifting and the summer's looking much more positive. So I'm just wondering if you've got any updates now on what's going to be happening with your
Yes, It's bizarre. I've had an out of office on my email for a while because I didn't anticipate anything really to have to do with work. And then suddenly, since the announcement, it's gone a bit crazy, which is very nice. And one of those, I'm presuming, Harlow Car is where you go. So one of the venues I was really concerned about was Harrogate Festival, because they've really seemed to have borne the brunt of the funding and not had very much help, at least to date. So I was anticipating that we might have to find another venue or at least another platform. But they're one of the organisations has been in touch and said, are we a go for 6th and 7th of July? And are we all up for it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So presumably, I mean, they didn't mention that Harlow Car wouldn't be the venue. So, I mean, it's an open air venue. So of all of our touring venues, the open air ones surely are going to be the ones that are more likely to happen. And given that it's in July, even better, because although things should be back on track from May 17th, that's still considered to be a time when people might need to socially distance within the audience. But hopefully by the 21st of June, that will be lifted too. So we're looking forward to a return to Harlow Car, very much in the style we're used to playing. So fingers crossed, nothing's signed and sealed, because to be honest, we were at that stage last year as well. We had contracts which were all signed and ready to go, and then obviously it didn't happen. So we're once bitten, twice shy, but hopefully all signs are that we'll be back.
Great. Is that okay? Is that a good answer for your question?
I'm just, do you know what you're going to be doing yet?
Yes, well, it makes sense for us to actually do the production that we were planning to do last year. So we're doing Comedy of Errors. How we do it will depend very much on the circumstances as to whether, you know, things are lifted. And
I think it's safe to say that we won't be jumping back in to how we were in 2019 because of there has been an impact on some of the venues. So the tour itself will be probably shorter. Financially, it'll be restricted, and there are still issues as far as social distancing and people, whether even cast members may not have been vaccinated. You know, we still haven't been vaccinated,
and we're the oldest.
And we're the oldest people in the cast, yeah. So I think it's safe to say that we will be back performing, but I think there will be a difference. We won't be able to escape that.
It may well be back to a little bit more our roots, really, and how we started. You know, the infrastructure means that we have to be much more kind of immediate and not so technically kind of big, really, potentially. So it may just be that what we do is more like the stuff that we used to do. Yeah, and even last year, I mean, obviously last summer, there was a lot of conversations about how one can actually manage a cast and a performance on a tour in these circumstances. And I think some of that has not gone away. So it's great that we will be able to go back and do some sort of performance and hopefully have, you know, a tour of some size, but I don't think we're out of the woods completely. And as we know, things can change in terms of, you know, infection rates and things like that. So we're crossing fingers, toes, and anything else that things will go ahead in some form.
I've got a nice question here from Paddy and Katie. Do you want to ask your question, Paddy and Katie? Hey. Can't hear you yet.
That's okay. Try that. Is that better?
Hi.
Hello, Paddy and Katie.
Can we just? We thoroughly enjoyed your performance at York.
Excellent.
It was great to just be out with people. It's the first time we were out with people.
Yes.
Our question is for certain people who, like this young lady here, who are considering going into acting, what's the best way for them to start, and how to develop her interest?
Well done, Katie. Are you a member of any acting groups, or at school, or locally?
No.
That's the best way in to start with.
We started, but
Oh, sorry.
Of course, a bit difficult to continue that kind of thing. I know our daughter Charlie is currently on a meeting with her youth theatre, but they've had issues, obviously, over the same time of being able to meet up and not meet up and doing it by Zoom. So I think it'll be a slow start, but getting involved with some form of theatre group is a really good way of getting contacts and experience.
That's how we both started. Amateur theatre is the way in, because you get a huge variety of influences and people with different abilities, and you get to play around and try different things out and see what works well for you and what you enjoy. Because that's the key to it, is doing what you enjoy and you feel confident, whether that's on stage, behind stage, or singing, or and the other thing I would say is, if you're interested, is it acting you're interested in, Katie?
Yeah.
And do you play any instruments or have any other skills that you
Yeah.
What do you do? What other things?
I play the piano.
Oh gosh.
I do gymnastics.
Great.
And I go diving.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Well, all of those things are useful, even the diving, because one of the things that companies do when they look to applications is to see what extra things people get involved in. And there have been people who have launched their careers on the back of being able to stand on their head, or blow fire, or whatever. So nothing that you do is wasted. Even riding a bike, or anything that you can do. Skills, that's what you need to do, is practice your skills. And the piano is probably the key to it because actor musicians are just worth their weight in gold, because if you have skills that can bring something in addition to brilliant acting to a job, Gemma will tell you, you need people who can play. Gemma plays the flute, she sings, she dances.
In fact, she's going to give us a term later, I believe.
and those are the things that set actors apart from each other, is if you can bring something else to the party.
Yeah, and I think being you and sort of not trying to be anybody else or like anybody else, being you is because you're the best at being you. And if you believe in yourself and want to do something, go and do it. And
continually ask yourself, what is it that you can do that nobody else can? And that's your way in.
Excellent advice. How wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Isn't that great, Katie? Good stuff. Okay, I've got a good question here. Well, a very simple question. Is the building listed? That's from Keith LePage.
Yes.
It is. Yes, it is.
The chapel is, and then by association, the other parts of the building. The project is based on 3 areas: the chapel itself, and attached to that is an education room, which used to be used for Sunday school. And then attached to the Sunday school room is just a very basic 2-bedroom cottage, which is what we're sitting in now. And the cottage and the education room are listed by association, and we're also in a conservation area. So anything we do comes under that listing.
So can I just the follow-up question is how different will it all look when you've finished? And presumably you'll take out all the pews and and that'll become something different. I don't know.
Not entirely. I think in some ways we kind of fell in love with it as it is. I think the main difference will be that all the walls will be plastered instead of falling apart or covered in mould, as they are now. But the actual chapel itself, a lot of that will basically look the same. We're keen to be able to double glaze and make acoustic sort of blocks on the windows, removable, but make it into a useful usable space, but it's mainly about insulation rather than covering up.
And there's some lovely architectural features. There's in the chapel itself, on the wall, are two beautiful marble plaques. One of them, at least, is definitely was created in the latter part of his life by a marble engraver called
Weston?
No, Walton White.
Walton White, that's it.
Who was very prolific in Derbyshire. And we've got one of his original plaques. So things like that are really important to keep and for people to have sight of, because for the last however many years, nobody's really been able to see it unless they've been a member of the church.
But one thing we do want to get rid of is the smoking coke stove that's in the middle of the floor, which is just horrendous.
It's neither use nor ornament.
Yeah.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I thank you. Thank you for your question. I've got a question here from Lynn. Lynn, do you want to ask the question yourself?
Yeah, if that's okay. Hello, everybody. Yeah, you've got quite a Yorkshire contingent here this evening. I'm from Doncaster, and I had the great privilege of seeing Midsummer Night's Dream at Cast in Doncaster. And had the most inspirational conversation with yourselves afterwards. So I could not be here this evening. So my question really is kind of on behalf of my daughter and probably other young creatives who are just about to step into the industry in some way, shape or form. Times are very, very, very uncertain, and a lot of these young creatives are working so hard and are so passionate about coming into the creative industry, and yet they look out their windows, and who can blame them for being a little bit despondent in these times of uncertainty. So really, just for people like my daughter, for Katie here, you know, just kind of stepping out, what advice would you give to these people? Not necessarily young, there might be some mature creatives out there who are wanting to kind of step up. So what advice would you give?
Absolutely. I think because both of our kids they're young adults now, and they're creatives. And we've had this kind of, you know, going on for a long time. How are they going to earn a living? How are they going to do what they want to do? And I think we've had one of the reasons I think we moved here is because we've had a little bit of a sea change in our thought about what the future holds. The prospect of being able to buy a house to live in on an actor's salary or salary earnings is pretty slim. And I think the way we've sort of rationalized it a little bit is to say that what's important is doing what you want to do, so long as it doesn't harm anybody else. And in order to be able to do that, it's about finding a community, a network of people, of artists, of a situation that allows you to make a way in life, make a living, find a home, find a network of either like-minded individuals or people or a community that you can serve that allows you to do your thing whilst serving that community. And it's quite rare, but I do think it's a different way of looking at the future that isn't all about earning as much money as you can so you can pay the mortgage, which I guess is how we started. You know, we got to a point where, we've become actors, and then we got to a point of, we need to pay the mortgage. So we had to be very practical about how we were actors. And that became a big part of what we did, was needing to be able to pay the mortgage. And we've reached a point with this pandemic where we can't pay the mortgage. So we've been creative. We've looked differently at the future and thought, what do we need to be able to survive? We need a roof over our heads, but it hopefully will be in a community and in a way that will enable us to live, to create, to perform, to serve, without making lots of money.
Not relying on other people to give you that money, to pull your skills, and to go back to how we started in a way, which was literally write down on a piece of paper everything that we could do, and training as actors was part of that. But also on one of the jobs that we did, we learned clowning skills. And so we combined the two things, and we thought laterally, we thought about how we can combine those two things, and we came up with something that was therefore original, because to my mind, nobody else was doing Shakespeare whilst fire blowing or walking on stilts. So I think it's about that. It's about looking, like I was saying to Katie, looking at what skills you've got and then networking. And not relying on, because the competition is so stiff out there. There are so many people chasing a few jobs that are diminishing. It's about creating something for yourself and using every bit of backing and support that you can, whether it's Arts Council, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's just creating your own piece of work. We know people who've created performances which they've done at their local park and asked for donations for. So it's about thinking out of the box and thinking, how can we serve a need?
And I mean, it isn't just creative skill, or I say creative, it isn't just traditionally artistic skills. I mean, I used to beat myself up in my head about the fact that I didn't learn an instrument and do tap dancing and do the artistic stuff. But what I did do was metalwork and woodwork, and I was always very physically handy. And hey, look where we are now. Suddenly we've got a space that means those skills are going to be really important to be able to make a space that we can work in, because we couldn't afford to buy something that was already made. And so it is about not being frightened to think differently and not go the way everyone else goes.
And I think this pandemic has thrown everything up in the air.
And I think, and just to add to that, Andy, I was thinking that, it's also about not saying I can't, but saying, how can I?
Yes.
So if whatever the barrier is, okay, instead of just letting that barrier be there, you can say, okay, how can I then achieve what I want to achieve? And and I love what you said about, people being experts, about being themselves. That's so important. It's so important. But also, Andy, you wouldn't have started the operation of Oddsocks the way it is without your metalwork and your handy, because building that set, from the wagon, those beginnings with the wagon, you would never have entered into that if you didn't have the confidence to say, well, I know what a hinge pin is, I can make it work.
And also the nerve to say to our neighbour, we were living in London at the time when we built our cart, to say to the neighbour, you've got a driveway, we haven't, can we build our idea on your driveway?
So it's surprising, and I think you're right, the pandemic has thrown a lot of this up. Just thinking about life differently. A lot of people have had that opportunity, but may feel awkward or frightened about doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. And I would say don't be frightened, don't be nervous, be yourself, and choose what you want to do, rather than doing what you want to do.
Thank you. That was a fabulous question. I've got a lovely little statement here. It's not a question, it's just a statement from Simon Mulholland, who wanted to just say, we're all looking forward to our picnics being raided in the great outdoors.
We're looking forward to raiding them. It would be nice to be able to do that, and and hopefully hopefully, if the restrictions allow it. Unfortunately, we're a little bit careful about that now. I think you're going to have to donate rather than let's come and get it.
I think what I think the thought of us
invading
in
front of the stage. So
yeah,
put your donation here and we'll spray it.
I think invading picnic space might just put a few people off at the moment.
It will be a sort of a little harvest festival, won't it?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, that maybe we just put on a little shelf. And if people leave stuff there, you know, as long as they're 2 meters away, we'll come and sniff it, and you know.
Wine improves with age.
Okay. Clive has lots of questions, which I will leave him to talk to you about. So, Clive, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Andy and Ellie your questions?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, it's the first time I've used Zoom, and I'm a bit of a technophobe, so
no, this
bear
is
with
great.
me.
Nice show.
I'm wanting to go on, so I'll try not to go on. But I'm with Lynn. I also saw that production at Cast in Doncaster, Midsummer's Night's Dream. That's the only production I've seen, obviously, because we've been in lockdown. So, and I echo what Lynn says about that. Very inspiring. But I remember it's a very windy day, and I read that you were going on to Channel Islands after that. And some of those, there was a gale hitting the Channel Islands. I thought about you. I thought it must have been cancelled or something.
It was pretty bad. Yes.
Yeah. So my questions were a couple. I was watching your video last night, and we saw a performance at the Montgomery Theatre in Sheffield, Oliver Twist, done by a theatre company called Red Earth Theatre Company. Similar theatre company yourself, small cast, and what they did was they used puppets as part of that performance. And it made me realise the power of doing that, in that you can convey some quite difficult concepts in an acceptable way, in a less stressful way. You know, the concepts of death, or you know, anything can be. You see, because you're abstracting it a little bit more through the puppet.
Definitely.
The other thing was that also, if you're a smaller cast, it gets away with sort of like having to double up on the parts. The other thing is you can do effects with them, like levitation or ghosts rising and stuff. So I was really interested when I saw the puppetry that you were going to use in Christmas Carol. I thought it was an excellent idea.
I think it's something that we actually have often used, but not gone to the level that we did in Christmas Carol up until now. And it was really exciting. We really enjoyed doing that. And you're right. I think it does provide some opportunities to tell stories in different ways.
I think what was a delight with Christmas Carol is that we were able to spend, because of the funding that we had, which was to create a project, we were able for the first time to really spend time doing it properly, because we've always used puppets, we've always made them ourselves, we've always had fun with them, but it was really nice to be able to have that time to learn from somebody whose skills are, I always think of us, and often the people that we work with, as jack of all trades, if you like. And it's what funding allows one to do is work with master of one. So that was a real benefit for us, and I think it's something that we'll hope to expand on, but it costs money because people with those specialist skills can command fees that we usually, being an unfunded company, can't afford. But just learning some of the skills will help us continue, and you know, hopefully be able to invest in the future at some point too.
Yeah, I love your remit. I know that you're sort of developing and sort of changing some of the way that you're going, but taking Shakespeare to the masses I think that's brilliant. The only other thing I was going to say for now was I love what you're doing with the chapel. I'm so glad that you've been able to move into it. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes,
I just want a very specific question, a bit odd, but coming from a religious background, I just wondered if there was any special requirements like deconsecration of the chapel before you could move in.
Just before we came on with you guys, we asked our architect the very same question. And she is of the mind that it stopped being used as a chapel, as a community space for that, for the group of people a couple of years ago, and hasn't been used as that space. And at the time, when they decided to sell, the congregation had diminished to, I think, about 4 people. And so we felt sort of that part of our plan is to open it back up to the community. And whilst it's not a religious place, it will be a place where community will meet, and everything that's important to us about, not being particularly religious ourselves, but everything that's important to us is about the community. And so to give people an option to use the chapel as a space and to be respectful of the fact that it was a chapel. For example, one of the things that we found, we were really lucky, we found a whole box of old chapel hymn books which were inscribed with Lee Chapel. They're embossed with Lee Chapel on. And one of the things that we're going to do on one of our first community events is to offer those up to people so that people have a memento to take away, a memory of the chapel. And as far as the grounds go, it's not been used as a burial site, so we don't believe that it needs to be deconsecrated in that sense. We're not going to disturb the ground, so there shouldn't be any reason to be concerned about that either.
Yeah, and it's quite something that we were quite interested in with the Nightingale family, is that it started out as a Methodist dissenting chapel. So it was in its infancy something which stood out as being unique and different. The dissenting Methodists were, chose a different route from the state, and I think that's really interesting. But throughout the ages, and it was being used, and then it got to the point where there simply wasn't a big enough congregation who were using it. And it fell into disrepair. And in many ways, the state that it was in and the state that the religious artifacts were in, the Bible here, etc., the hymn books, were falling apart, were rotten, were damp, were mouldy. And it's kind of like, I feel like we're taking care of it more than the religious people did. Do you know what I mean? At the time, and I don't blame them, but I'm just saying we're going to be respectful of it, but we also want to be positive for the community and use it in a way that will serve others
and commemorate
as well.
Their memories. We've got plans of doing an art exhibition which will commemorate people's experiences of the chapel as they grew up attending services.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, just 2 things and I'll finish. The history, whether you believe or not, must palpably resonate. The fact that the atmosphere, I guess, must resonate if it's been going for that long. Yeah. And also, ultimately, the church isn't the building; it's the people, which fits in with what you want to do for the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice, Clive. Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much for that, Clive. Brilliant.
Thank you.
So I've got a question here from Simon Mulholland. Do you want to ask your question, Simon?
Yes, good evening.
Hello. Hello.
We're another one from God's own county. And I wouldn't for a second imply that because it was free, we're all here. We've noticed, obviously, with the pandemic, it's forced ways of changing. We're all sat here, deaf by Zoom as usual. I've seen quite a lot of changes with musicians and even museums changing their approach because they've had to. Specifically going online. YouTube's a great medium now. This is brilliant, pay-per-view and stuff like that. Are you looking to do more of that stuff in the future, not only to get the word out there to the community, which we feel we are, but also potentially as a revenue stream for maybe wallpaper?
It's interesting. I think, one can't ignore the digitalization of culture. For me, it doesn't replace the feeling of a live event, of live music or live theatre. I personally don't get as much out of like the National Theatre Live broadcasts or anything like that. I think it's a different thing. Some people enjoy it, some people get that theatre in there in that way. But I still like I guess the physical aspect of seeing it and hearing it live. And so we will continue to do that for as long as we can. But I guess hopefully with time we can open up revenues or avenues for digital performances or digital broadcasts of our performances.
But I think there is a difficulty in that there is so much free content online that it's actually difficult to create a revenue stream of any significance. We've been really lucky with the work that we did during first lockdown. We did 3 at-home performances of Shakespeare, and people were hugely generous and really positive. And when we came back to do more, that revenue stream, those donations did actually diminish a bit, because there was competition, and also people have been very generous in the first place. So there is a limit to it, but certainly it can't be ignored. And in terms of museum, you mentioned museums. Obviously, we've got a heritage interest here now, and we're really lucky in that over the years we've worked a lot with heritage organisations, and I do see that very much as a kind of a way forward, because I think that can have an international impact, which is what this is brilliant for, especially with Brexit and being unable to actually go to places as easily. I think it'd be more important that those connections are made and those partnerships are made. And we're talking a lot with partners in the heritage field about how we can combine and work together.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, did you want to say something else?
No, it was just more of a comment. The thought was in my head because I'm a patron of the Tank Museum at Bovington.
All right, yeah.
Right.
And for the last 15 months, obviously, they've been putting videos out, and the curator has basically been selling their merchandise in their YouTube videos. He sits in his garden and tries to sell you as much stuff as possible, a bit like David Jason out of Only Fools and Horses type. And it's like you say, that that was forced on them. I don't think in a million years they would have considered that. And I think, like you say, there's nothing better than being in an audience in a theatre. York Christmas was just a blessing when we went there. But I think the two can run in parallel. And I think you have a community around you that are willing to support you.
Absolutely. Tonight is a real indication of that, yeah.
And I think from our perspective, I think we want to be careful not to bleed that community dry, if you like, in the sense that we do have a lovely network and a great supporting community, but we're also conscious that some of that community will have lost work, and to constantly have a sort of help us, feed us, all the time. I find it quite, I obviously get lots of charitable emails and things like that, and after a while you just get sort of blind to it, because everybody's asking for money and everybody needs money. And I suppose what I want to be able to do is provide something in return. That's not always possible, but being able to give back and make something for the community is really important, so that we're not just asking people for money. We want to be able to, provide something in return. And I think the first Stay Home Shakespeare really did that. From the the comments for people, it was like, this is what we've been waiting for. This is fantastic, it's great. But then, as Ellie said, we sort of got to the point where everyone was doing it, and so it wasn't that different. So you're constantly having to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. Great questions. I've had a nice little just a comment really from Emily Bolting, who's the director of the Riverhouse Barn, who's kind of sponsored these evenings.
Hello.
Emily, do you want to just say what your comment was?
Oh, I just thought, I mean, I saw you ages ago, and just you know, took my children, who were quite small at the time, to see when he came down to the River House when Gemma was running it, and we took some friends, and it was just brilliant. And I love what you do. And then, you know, when Gemma showed me her original conversations, and you've been very brave, and, you know, and and I had such sympathy. but now you look energized. And this move, because it was just a thing that you were, you know, it was a thing on the horizon when you did that. And then it was actually happening. And I remember speaking to Gemma and saying, you know, is it happening? And now you look, you know, back to what you are, and energized, and it's just lovely to see. And I just thought, you know, that's great. And if it can just boost that feeling of being connected and creative, and, you know, all those ideas again, and it feels like you're giving the building something back, and the building's giving you something back, and it's lovely. It's just great to see.
Definitely, thank you. I think I think throughout our life and relationship, we've often reached, you call them plateaus or whatever, certainly times where you go, we need to do something differently. We've got this far, we're doing this, but we feel like we need to move on. And I think the pandemic certainly did that, as it's done to a lot of people. And I think the only thing we can do is think and act on instinct, which is effectively what we've done. And we keep doing things like that, and now we're living here.
No, it looks brilliant.
I have a question, because we were chatting on the messages here about making mistakes and how important it is to make those mistakes in life and to fail, basically. What do you think you two have done in your life that you can honestly say that was a massive fail, but that you have learned from, and it has actually retrospectively then given you the benefit to move forward?
There was the Much Ado 2009.
Yeah, definitely.
That was the hardest one.
It was, there was a period of time where Ellie and I didn't go out on the road with the tours, and we were we were trying to, that was a time where theatre was being used by business a lot. So we had a lot of contracts that were for training and for making videos, infomercials, things like that. And it was very lucrative, and it was an avenue. And I think it was as digital film became much more accessible, it was like, okay, we can do this. And, you know, a laptop like this enabled us to produce corporate DVDs, and it was a whole new business.
What happened is that we took time out ourselves personally to focus on that, and sent the tours out on their own. And initially there were always a couple of people involved in those tours who'd worked with us on tours previously, but there came a point where it was an entirely new group of people who'd never worked with us closely, only in rehearsal, and it didn't work. The show worked, the audiences enjoyed it, and people still talk about it. They were good actors, but it didn't work from a perspective of company feel. To tour open air for 3 months in the summer in England is bloody hard, because there's so much to enjoy about it, but you have to really work hard to enjoy that, because as somebody was saying earlier, you know, Clive, the weather can be a nightmare, and it's hard work, it's hard physical work. And unless you see the bosses working harder than everyone else, it don't work. And it didn't work with us turning up at the end of the week or on at a gig every now and again and going, "Hi guys, here's a load of beer, how you doing?" It didn't work, because people built up resentment about how hard it was in between, and they didn't see how hard we were working. And that didn't work. So I would say our biggest mistake was letting that go and not being part of it. And you know, thankfully we realised, and we went back on tour. And it was a real learning curve. And I get every year he gets sick of me saying, I always have a point in rehearsal or on the tour when I go, I'm sick of learning curves. I'm 55. But actually you need them.
Yeah, it's true. I think no one owns the company but the owners, if you like. You do.
It was constantly back on the floor, wasn't it? That was like that program that you know, back to the floor. And it's just true. It's so important, you know, because I think it's really important to go up there and lead it from the front.
And it was also about, in a way, we didn't have a plan. So we thought we ought to be doing this thing, but we didn't really know why.
And we thought it might give us a bit of a break, and we'd be able to sit in the garden of an evening and drink wine and not have to be performing. And it was the worst thing, because we'd end up sitting there going, why aren't we enjoying this?
Why are we still worried about the actors on tour? You know, we're supposed to be relaxing. I mean, the kids were very young, and we were able to spend some summertime
in Gemma's place in France.
Yeah. But you know, there was definitely things that, yeah, I think if I was to do that now, I'd do it differently, definitely. But yeah, that's certainly a learning curve. The other one was trying to deliver yellow pages when you've only got a transit van, and realising that you weren't getting 10 pence a copy, you were getting 0.01 penny a copy or something, and having to fill the transit van up and then empty it before you went back to fill it up again.
And so living on yellow pages in the flat.
We had furniture made of yellow pages because this was one of those jobs that we did between tours. I thought it was a really good idea. It wasn't.
I love it. I think there's a whole nother program or documentary, isn't it, about what actors have done in between jobs.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got a whole story about having to drive around in a van with a big loudspeaker on top, launching the new celebrity board game, Who's Had Who. Yeah,
you don't want to go there.
That was a treat. So I think actors have a real list of jobs that they've done which they'd rather forget.
Yeah. But I suppose it's always important, you talk about mistakes. I think someone very wise, you know, said that it's not a mistake, it's a learning point that you go on from. It's just the stepping stone to the success that you eventually have. And I guess if you think of it like that, then you always, you know, get a positive response from it.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you quantify how the new move is going to change your lives? What's the kind of...
I'm hoping that the pressure of needing to cover the bills, cover the mortgage, will allow us to continue performing and doing what we enjoy doing, rather than doing it for the money, which often leads to not enjoying it. Sometimes the performance, I mean, already the arts is a tough game to make a living at. It was never going to get easier, I don't think. And I mean, when we started the company 31 years ago, theatres, there were festivals
almost
that
in
were
every town.
festivals that were funded and supported. They would pay us a fee, and quite often the performance would be free to the public. You know, that happened a lot in London, in all sorts of places, and there was so much more the performance around in the open air and things like that. And over the time that we've been going, it's a completely different setup now. It's really hard to command a fee for, you know, it's always about
a box office split.
Box office split,
and theatres taking more and more of a cut, so taking lots, having to, because they're unfunded or they're struggling, but taking cuts of everything. So you end up actually, you know, just about breaking even or not even that, but in both parts. So it makes it harder. The cherry gets smaller and more people biting at it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've discussed this a lot, that whole kind of the inconsistency of the payment and the whatever. And I think, you know, there is that attitude of, but it's exposure for you. You should be pleased that you're doing this for nothing. You know, it means you're getting loads of exposure. But of course, this is a profession. You know.
I've tried saying that to the plumber.
Yes.
Saying, you know, we'll tell all our friends about it. And yet they don't seem to want to work for nothing. I don't get it. Yeah.
I think this kind of feeds into one of the questions I had, which was, how do you think your attitude towards your work has changed over the years?
Ooh. I think we've probably got braver in some ways, in that we've got more confident, because initially, you know, we did things and we had no idea whether people would find it as funny as we found it. And we've learned that you're ridiculous people. And that obviously gives us creative confidence. And I think quite often, you know, when the arts is struggling or when we're struggling to get theatres to book us or audiences to buy tickets, things like that, that hits one's confidence, and you're always looking to you don't want to be the ones that are still doing the same thing, you know, that they were doing years ago. You've got to be able to adapt to survive, but also not lose the essence of what you started doing, because that works. But equally, don't just repeat the same thing, because there's a whole different generation of audience members out there. You know, the people that were kids that came to see the show are now parents when we started.
Grandparents.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing there's a few messages, so I'm just sort of reading them. But from Lisbeth Ann, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I've known, I don't know if Auntie Nelly recognise me. Hi,
oh yes, we do. Hello.
I've known Auntie Nelly for what, almost 30 years? First saw them at the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham, actually in Liverpool. And my question, although I've suddenly thought of another one as well, if you don't mind. My question initially was going to be about the building. I think, Ellie, you mentioned that it's a small cottage on the side of the chapel. Have you got any plans to make that bigger, or is the chapel going to be your creative space and you're going to have like a little tiny living space?
No, we are hoping, we've put in an application to expand the cottage into a bit more of a living space, which means taking it into the education room and using the education room really as a two-way thing, as our kind of living room and space where if people are working in the chapel, they can relax as well. So it's a kind of two-way thing, but it does mean expanding the cottage a little bit to make it a little bit, because at the moment the kitchen was built for little people of, you know, who lived in the 1800s. So we need to do things to that. So all being well, it'll expand a little bit. We're
not expanding the outer walls. No. It's all within. So it's a change of use. So that Sunday school becomes residential, and gets incorporated into the cottage.
But it means taking down some unsupporting walls, which we need some permission to do. So whilst we're applying for it, we're realistic about what they might let us do and what they might not.
Right. Okay. May I ask one more question?
Of course.
It's about when I first saw you many, many years ago, the instruments you played were much more sort of medieval lutes and things, and you were obviously on the cart. these days it's much more electric and microphones and so on. Which do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
That's interesting.
I think you prefer the electric stuff because you always want to be a rock star.
Yeah, I think so, probably. Yeah, I think in the open air, it does, the acoustic stuff does get swallowed up. The ambience, I think it depends on the space that we're in, but so often we're performing in a space where, again, it comes down to money from the organisers. They want a space big enough to be able to get a big enough audience to be able to make enough ticket money to be able to pay us and make a profit. So in a way, audiences have got bigger, and so we've had to reach further. And little mandolins and things like that just don't cut it.
That's come because venues don't want to have us for longer than one night if they can help it, because you know, they don't have to do as much marketing, they don't have to staff it as much. So if they can fit an audience into one night, but it doesn't mean that we've had to reach out further. And in 2014, we took that decision to grow bigger in that sense, because we felt like things were a bit of a race to the bottom, because there were lots of other companies who were doing work that was more similar to how we started, which is much more acoustic, and they were charging much less because their overheads were less, and they were perhaps younger and didn't have a family and a mortgage and whatever, so they were undercutting in a way. So I had to make a decision to either invest and grow bigger or lose out. Plus, it gave me a chance to be a rock star.
It's true. I mean, I remember some places like Goresworth Hall that they do a whole season in Cheshire. They get a grandstand, 1,000 people, and they put on performances every week for about 5 weeks. And you know, they were hit hard by the pandemic, but the commitment that they put into it financially meant that playing to 1,000 people, there is nothing quite like it. We only do it once on a tour, but it is remarkable the energy that you get from 1,000 people all laughing at the same joke. And you know, those were some really, really great performances. And yeah, I think I did enjoy that a bit too much, didn't I? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great questions. Clive, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, there we are. Yeah.
Sorry, it took me half an hour to unmute myself. Yeah, just a couple of comments. Just picking up what you said earlier, Andy, about struggling to make a living in the arts, and I find it so sad because, as we all know, the arts is the first thing to be cut, you know. And for me, the arts enriches the human condition and elevates the human condition, and it makes it worth being human, basically. And I find it so sad that it's one of the first things to be cut. So, and the people have to struggle to make a living at it.
And what's the first thing that people have turned to during this time is things like
Netflix,
films, all of those things.
Yeah. It is really interesting, and I think it comes. I mean, this is my theory, but it does come down to people somewhere wanting to make a lot of money. I think the majority of people would be very happy just being able to have a job, have security, enjoy life. But it's the constant need to make more money, and it drives the insecurity, which means people have to earn more money to protect themselves from this. But it's reached a point, I do think, with the next generation where if they're not in a job that, you know, pays a lot of money now, I don't know where that job's coming from. And I think, you know, I'm not worried, I'm just aware that the way things are going to go will be very interesting. And I think we can no longer rely on the same ideas that were perhaps 10 years ago. That if you work hard, you get a good job, you can pay the mortgage, you know, I just don't think that exists anymore. And so finding a way to be able to live a fulfilling life and not be part of that constant drive to constantly make money, I think that's the secret of a happy existence.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I was going to say, I know with the expansion of the service economy, you'd think that there'd be more time for arts, but as you say, what you don't want is just to pander to the lowest common denominator and just, you know, you don't want to be a money-making exercise, because just because something's popular doesn't mean to say it's good, basically.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think what's happened is the things like Patreon and the digitalization of music is that art has become content, and one becomes a content creator rather than an artist. And I don't mean to sound all arty, but in a way, the content, when you have to create more and more content so that people pay a few pence to watch it, and then they want more, and they need a little bit more because it's not that satisfying. You know, it's the whole Facebook algorithm, it's that little, dopamine hit, isn't it? We've had a little laugh, oh, I want another one. And it can be really exhausting, and it can be really detrimental to the art, in that actually, the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. So the fact that you get in the car or get on the train and you go and you sit down with a picnic and you know, invite friends, you pick up the phone and you say, oh, there's this theatre thing, come along, we'll all go, we'll pack a picnic, we'll make a special event of it. And it is a special event, and you get something more out of it than if you stay at home and you watch it on the screen, it lasts the same amount of time, and then you wait for the next thing. It's almost like you do have to put a lot more into it to get the real joy out of it, I think.
No, I agree. I'll wrap it up from my end, but I just want to say something about the echoing Lisbeth's comments about contemporizing. I would love the way that you contemporize, and you brought in the is it 10cc song into the Midsummer's Night's Dream, microwave ovens, you know, where you played the modern music. I'm reading a book at the moment called The Englishman and the Madman, about the development of the Oxford English Dictionary. And in Shakespeare's day, there basically weren't any dictionaries, so there was nobody to tell Shakespeare how he could use a word, basically.
Yeah.
And that is so creative, and that's something that you've done. You kind of put a spin on it and sort of modernized it a bit, but also I love the way that you stick to the original text as well. So I love the way you sort of jazz it up, but make it accessible, but also true to the original.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clive. That's, yes, really so true, isn't it? And I think what was lovely in the documentary was seeing you two talking when you were much, much younger, which was hilarious. And in fact, Adrian, my husband, I've told you, Ellie, just could not believe how much like Lady Diana you look.
Why wasn't it proud?
It was extraordinary. But yeah, I think what was lovely about you two then is that, you know, these serious questions, or, you know, seemingly serious questions that were asked to you, and you could both you could see you thinking, I don't really think that hard about these things. We just do it, you know, kind of, and you could see you struggling, Andy, with, you know, your characterization, and you know, and you were just kind of wanted to say, well, I just do it.
It's got a funny nose on.
Yeah, but I thought it was fantastic the way she said, do you talk in Shakespeare at home?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, I don't know whether it's the time or the questions that were asked, but I think we think more deeply about other things other than the acting.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like what I don't know, what people expect you to think deeply about the acting. Maybe proper actors do, I don't know. I mean, we are proper actors, but we think more deeply about the effect that it's going to have and why we're doing it.
It's been really quite challenging because one of my jobs during lockdown, but also before that, has been teaching students, you know, coaching their monologues online for drama school or whatever, or teaching people from within an organisation called Open Doors, which helps people who haven't got the financial wherewithal to apply for drama school, which to date has been hugely expensive, and we provide free training for them. And it's really hard to put into words how you do it, to analyse it, because it is quite an organic process, I think, for us. But I don't think it is the same for every actor. There's a lot of cerebral actors out there who have to think their way through it. It's just different types of people. We're just lucky that we're both very sort of quite intuitive and quite organic. There's been quite a challenge to think about how do we do it. It's a good exercise.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. Katie and Paddy want to ask another question. Do you want to ask your question, Katie?
Yeah.
Hi, Katie.
Hello.
Yeah.
What got you into acting?
A programme, I believe, when I don't remember it, but I do know the programme.
Repeats.
It was a drama. I can't remember the name of it now. That's age, but it was a drama on television about Henry VIII when I was 4, and apparently I said to my mum, "That's what I want to do." So I really, from the age of 4, I didn't want to do anything else but act, and always knew that I wanted to. So from about the age, how old are you, Katie? Do you mind me asking?
10.
You're 10. Okay. So from about 12, I started working with a local amateur company and playing roles with them, and it was just being in the rehearsal room. I loved it. You know, I loved working with other actors, and that's why I'm an actor. It's not, for me, it's not about necessarily storytelling and things like that, although that is obviously part of it. It's about being in a room with a load of actors. I just love actors.
And for me, I think by the time I was 10, I'd already played Joseph in the school nativity play. So,
I would be the fat cow.
So I think it was in my blood because my parents were they were amateur actors, but my dad worked as a student with a very, very old theatre actor called Sir Donald Wolfett. And he was a great old ham actor, and he worked with him as a student and was offered a job. And he had that decision of, should I be sensible or should I run away with the circus kind of thing? And he chose to be sensible. And I think I basically had the opportunity to run away with circus, kind of. And then we both auditioned for drama school, which is the kind of, it's like a university for actors. It's a 3-year course. When I was 17 when I went, Auntie was a bit older, a year older or so. We auditioned for drama school, and that's a 3-year training just on acting. No written work, which was great. Just being an actor, learning how to use our voice and learning how to move and doing dance classes in tights. Yeah. Learning to do handsprings. Yeah. Doing things like fight tests, learning how to do sword fighting. That's what
we do sword fighting anyway.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm a reenactor.
Oh, perfect.
But that's another thing. That's great to have that experience. Fantastic. Yeah. Get that, work hard on that. That sets you apart from people. So drama school is a way to do it as well, rather than going, or you can do it at university. I know there's lots of people who go to university and get involved with their drama departments and do it for fun while they're doing a course to become an accountant or whatever. There's loads of ways into it, but we just did drama school, didn't we?
I have a question from Keith again, Keith LePage. Do you want to ask your question, Keith?
Hello, Keith. I know that name.
Yes, well, I'm originally a Guernseyman, so where I first saw you. But we now live in Maidenhead. And the sad point about living in Maidenhead is that we have to drive about 100 miles to come and see you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
We usually come out, well, Mary Alden's farm is about the closest, which is about 100 miles. So the question was about how do you choose the venues, or do they choose you? And is there any chance you could ever be a bit closer to Maidenhead?
Now, we are going to be in Surrey this July.
Oh, that's marginally better.
That's Paynes Hill, near to where Riverhouse Barn is. It is a case of venues choosing us. I mean, I have a huge database of people, of venues and festivals and people who run organisations that I send out our information to every time, you know, it comes up to the point where we're planning a production and go, do you want us? And it really is throwing it up in the air and seeing what lands. And I have to say that the north of England win outright in terms of, you know, they seem to be our mainstay, anywhere further than Derbyshire, north, right up to Northumberland. South, there's more competition, I guess. There are more companies, there are more people to draw on. There's more funding, so there are more companies, and we're competing against that.
The other thing that we've always said from audience point of view is mention us to local theatres and local venues.
They do listen.
They do listen to local audiences.
I did try, but nothing came of it.
And you know, we send, if anybody does get in touch and say, oh, have you tried it, we just immediately send information to those venues. But it really is, you know, that it's the venue's decision. And the way that we try and influence it is by trying to make sure that we're not going from Cumbria on a Tuesday and being expected to be in Portsmouth on a Wednesday. You know, it's logistics come into play sometimes.
And I know that you are very much enjoyed in Guernsey, and I think in Sark as well now.
Unfortunately, Guernsey
has
gone.
They've cancelled this year.
Sark, it may be to Sark's benefit, because it's not a million miles away, and hopefully people will leap on a boat and go for a day trip to Sark.
But they're still locked down. Well, not locked down. They still have.
I think so.
Quarantine will play a part. At the moment, we're still planning to go to Jersey and Sark. Summer, but we'll have to wait and see.
What happened to Guernsey?
I think they've had issues with coronavirus and quarantining, because both the islands and Sark, they were very isolated for a long time. Then they opened up and had quite a few cases, and so it was kind of, once bitten, they needed to react, was my understanding.
Yeah, Guernsey for a long time had no cases and was very vigorous about not letting anybody in. It's had a few cases now, but it's still trying to do the sort of New Zealand approach of totally eliminating it, whereas Jersey has let more people in and had a lot more cases. So you kind of choose which route you want to follow.
Yes, yeah.
And I believe Sark have had no cases.
Sark has had no cases, indeed.
But indeed, I think they've been very careful in terms of visitors, haven't they? Yeah,
indeed.
Another question from where are you? Lynn. Do you want to ask your question, Lynn? It's a cracking one.
Yes, please. Probably everybody else who's here this evening knows the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Oddsocks, the name, is there a kind of a deep and meaningful reason why you called yourself Oddsocks? Or were you looking for inspiration and were emptying the laundry basket one day and thought, oh, Oddsocks?
Not quite as domestic as that. It was more.
We started as a clown company, so even though we'd trained as terribly serious actors, one of our first jobs out of drama school was working together. We seem to have been cast together since the year dot at the Young Vic studio in London, and we were working on a production of Danton's Death and Faust. With a very earnest, very serious company. And within that company, a guy that we got on really well with was a clown. and that was his job. You know, at the weekend he'd go out and do clown shows, and we started working with him, and we learned the skills of clowning. And then we realised that actually we wanted to do it ourselves and run our own company. And it was literally on the first gig that we got, we needed to costume it. And so we thought, well, we're just going to choose bits from a second-hand shop.
We had odds and sods,
And we thought,
things, and we thought, we can't use that, but how about,
odd socks. So it's very uninspiring, really, but that's, and it's just stuck.
Yeah.
And certainly people who don't know our work assume things about us. Oh, you're a kids company, or you're this company, or whatever. But it's just that we've always used it. We've never wavered from it. But I do remember a gig really early on when we were doing a clown gig 30 years ago, and we thought it'd be a really good marketing thing to say, if you turn up wearing odd socks, you can get a discount. And we realised that people were turning up to the gig and realising and changing their socks with each other, getting their kids to change their socks over so they could get in free.
Yeah.
That was a big mistake.
we didn't do that again.
Brilliant. I love that. Another choice that maybe didn't work so well. But I think it's time for us to kind of draw this to a close now. I am so grateful for everyone who came and for Andy and Ellie.
Yeah, lovely experience.
It's been so lovely. I honestly could talk to you all night.
We do, Gemma, very often whenever we can. Lockdown.
You really do always, just have such interesting and profound things to say, and I think there's great value in sharing, these thoughts and talking to each other. I think it's really important. I know it's been hugely beneficial to me to be talking to you and to other people and understanding different points of view and understanding other people's challenges and learnings and all of that. But ultimately, you guys have spent 30 years bringing huge amounts of joy to audiences and to actors who've worked with you. I am very excited for you with this new chapter. And I hope everyone feels the same. In fact, I'm sure you do all feel the same. I would love to thank you all so much for your brilliant questions, audience. Thank you. Next week, we're talking to Johnny Broadbent and Laura Moody, who Johnny is a very successful kind of RSC actor, so very different kind of point of view. And Laura is an incredibly talented musician who's worked prolifically in all sorts of incredible shows, West End, etc.
Highly recommend it. They're very entertaining as well, aren't they? Johnny's great.
Yeah, and Johnny does backflips too.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
He does.
I never learned the backflip. Oh.
What you've got, Emily. Anyway, so I'm going to just say thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Andy and Ellie. And maybe there's scope to come back and talk to you maybe in a year and see what's happening.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do it from the chapel.
Maybe we can do it from the chapel when we're rehearsing or something.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be amazing. Okay, so goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Gemma, for hosting, and Riverhouse Barn, Emily. It's really good for the ego.
Good.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Good. I will talk to you soon.
See you in the summer, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.